So, hi there, um, Dave Dobbs here. Kind of a bit of an interesting video today, really, because I feel a bit low today. I've been feeling very emotional. This news that um, the radiation levels are rising over Europe, this big spike, and I'm looking just down at some of the sort of like the different news headings and that sort of stuff. And is it because Russia's tested a nuke in the Arctic, or is it because in one of my last videos when I did an interview with Rex Bear on his channel Leap Project, and in it I said one of the things that's going to happen when Nibiru flies by is you got to understand it's in the southern hemisphere, Nemesis, the whole system, this system with 7 planets orbiting around it, 1.1 obviously a very big one, and then smaller ones thereafter, or quite what order they're in. I understand Nibiru is the most furthest out, but some would call Nemesis itself, this dwarf planet, Nibiru. We have different names for it and that sort of stuff, and I don't think it's worth getting too confused with the different names and everything else like that. We just know we've got a dwarf planet up there, and we know we're getting drastic effects by it. And one of the things that happens is because it's I said this as if you like a prediction, but it wasn't really my prediction. It was a message that came in via Cody and Kim, who run a channel called the Star Lodge Healing Center, and they were the ones who I contacted when I first started making videos up here. And I read one of his. I read at that time. I don't think they had a YouTube channel, but I read one of his messages somehow. I can't remember how I started. Maybe it was on YouTube, but I really loved his message. It was a really beautiful message, and he channels like my mum channels, like my dad channeled. And his messages were beautiful, utterly beautiful. And I wrote to him and I said, look, I just want you to know that I know you're not getting a lot of hits on your site, but your message is beautiful, and the right people who need it are getting it, and I really needed it. And one of his messages came through recently was that, I hate to tell you, be the bearer of, it was kind of, I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but it was a message he got through, and it was a bit of a sad message, because it was saying that the radiation levels were going to rise really high, because in an effort to kind of assist this planet, it seemed to be on this sort of message that was coming through, that much of the radiation, to stop us killing our oceans, much of this radiation that's pouring out of Fukushima and into the oceans is going to be sucked up by these massive storms that are created as we go over the whole Nemesis system. Because, like I say, it pulls on our whole planet massively, and it stretches us, if you like, from our position of how we're held, and the assistance that we're getting, as I'm understanding as well, which is, this is the whole thing is a very unbelievable thing. That's the problem with Nibiru, really. But everything that's happening at the moment is unbelievable, really. But he gave this message, basically. Kim or Cody gave this message, basically saying that it was going to suck up vast amounts of radiation from these massive cyclones and tornadoes in the ocean. We're going to create these massive water funnels and draw up like sucking out snake venom, this much of this poison. But it was going to be rained down on land, and that we had to prepare on some level, because we would have enormous radiation poisoning. We have enormous radiation poisoning absolutely coming our way, and that's the absolute evidence of it, of this whole system. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? It's utterly heartbreaking. I try and do this without glasses, because someone mentioned the other day that you look better without glasses, and maybe I can see it. I can barely see a thing without glasses sometimes, but it's sometimes good to be able to see into the whites of your eyes who you're speaking to, and we can't do that with all these politicians and everything else like that, and we hear all this stuff. The story is that humans can't go near it because they die, and a machine only lasts 6 hours, so they can't use machine because it only lasts 6 hours before it melts at Fukushima. And I do the maths of that, and I think, so we can send armies and armies to sort of like to bomb countries and everything else like that, but Fukushima, it costs, machines only last 6 hours, so it's just like, well, just how many machines do you need? If they only last 6 hours, how many machines do you need? Well, can we not come together as a globe to supply the amount of machines? If we all came up with sort of like if every country in the world came up with one of those machines and gave it to Japan, you know, then we'd have, I don't know how many six hours worth. You know, we have to remember that lots of little is still lots. You know, and all your efforts out there and all our combined efforts to stop this agenda, we've got to remember that we might only be able to do so little in what we do, but lots of little is still lots. And we've got to remember that, especially in this time. You know, all your efforts, all our combined efforts at the moment to stop this agenda that's going forward. And so I wanted just to talk a little bit more about, you know, the flyby that I predicted on the 25th and what I offer as evidence for that flyby. A little bit, because, you know, over Mexico, you know, that I said it would fly by on the 25th, didn't I? 25th of January 2017, and we saw what I offer as a flyby on that came by on the 21st of January 2017, and of course that was a day after Trump's inauguration. When he's seriously threatening Mexico. Now the Mexicans saw that, what I call as a Nibiru flyby. They saw that, you know, that big cloud you see round the side of it. They saw that as like as the sleeve, the cuff of a sleeve, and they saw the tail as the arm, and they saw the planet Nibiru in the center. They saw that as the fist. They saw that literally as the fist of God. That's literally how they perceived that. And I'd say they're right. I'd say they're absolutely right. You know, Trump was really quite heavy about the whole thing on his inauguration. He's been totally heavy. To them, that was the fist of God. To me, it was Nibiru, but I see Nibiru kind of as the fist of God. I suppose a celestial object. You know, and what's the sighting I predicted before then? I said it would fly by on the 23rd of June 2016, and I offered a sighting then. You know, at that point I didn't know whether it was going to come out that side of the solar system or the side that we're discovering it is now. You know, I really didn't know. The sighting before that was on the 22nd of 22nd of December 2015, and then we had two sightings, you know, on the 20th and the 24th, you know, which corroborated that, you know. And then before that I said that on the 7th of November 2015, I said that the actual Nemesis system was actually crossing the ecliptic. We didn't know which way it was going to go, if you imagine like a dolphin diving out of the water and coming back down into the ocean. That point where it's out of the water, we're assuming that that's the northern hemisphere, and there was a point where it's going to plunge back from whence it came, and whether it was going to keep going in that direction as it had come down and just continue out, which meant that we would have been very close to it in June, on June 23rd, 2015. But in reality, we saw a tiny tail. We had corroborated testimony come in exactly when I said it was going to go by. Remember, this is just looking at all the corroborations every 200 days. That's the only observation that goes into this. You know, you can see this by every 200 days. This thing comes up, and after you've got that amount of data and that amount of observations, you can start making predictions. To me, that's absolute science. To me, that's absolute science. You're using a variety of corroborated data that's coming in from across the board, and you're bringing that data in, and it's telling you the same thing. You see, where different people have different interests in this fundamental system. Some people focus on Nemesis, the dwarf planet. Some people focus on the objects orbiting around the dwarf planet closest. You know, the big blue Kachina, as some call it, and others, you know, focus more specifically on the movements of Nibiru. To me, you know, obviously the whole system affects us. We see it with the massive storms, but this furthest orbiting planet of the seven planets, Nibiru, that I call Nibiru, that to know where that is exactly, and when we can know its movements and everything else of that. And don't worry, I'm not going to give you another fly-by-day. It's too much stressful for me. You can use all the maths I've done. I've predicted it 3 times now. It's not exactly hard to work out exactly to the day when this thing's going to next pass using, you know, 3 times correct. I know that sounds a bit on my own backside, but literally, I offer tangible data. I've got all the evidence for this all the way through. Yeah, you can say it's chemtrails, you can say it's all these different things, but you see, I am about to offer you another prediction, and it's a prediction that I wrote in Laughing Gas. It was kind of my original prediction, really, and you know, that's not a plug, by the way. I always, you know, when I'm talking about this, you know, one day I'd like to sell my books, one day I'd like to get a publishing deal, one day I'd like to have enough money to be able to just focus all my attention into my writing. But right now, and time, you know, because right now it's not about writing, it's about what's happening literally right now. And you know, when I was working on a second book after Laughing Gas, where I was arriving at this space where I was creating this situation, to come up with the remedy and the solution to the sort of problem, and then suddenly it just realised that it was no point writing a story about this, because this had to be lived. And so, kind of like this second book that I was writing, the memoirs of a hash fudge salesman, kind of got on the back burner a little bit, and I ended up in this. But nonetheless, I made a prediction in Laughing Gas, and I kind of made a I kind of made a number of predictions, but to understand it, because, you know, if you think I wrote that in 2000, I published it in 2012, you know, so I pretty much, you know, I was at the very last stages of it in sort of 2011. You know, I really, the greater part of that book was written in 2000, and, you know, it was really probably assembled in 2000, and the raw ideas came in 2006. It started taking the form of the book in 2008, and it was probably a manuscript of sorts, of reasonable sorts, in 2010. You know, so, but I'll read you a little excerpt, just a short excerpt, because it's very important to understand this before you can really get your head around the scale of what you're dealing with right now. And some people say that politics and Nibiru shouldn't mix, but I don't know how you could get a Rizzler paper between the two, really. This is all about choices, and so many of our choices are enacted through our sort of like through the whole political system, that you cannot separate Nibiru from politics in any way, shape or form. So let me just put my glasses on to read this. Their whole relationship had all been summer wine, right up to the point he'd started saying that all the banks were about to go pop and this crazy thing was about to go down, beginning with the big boys up top, beating the drum for an all-out war he knew could never be won. A terrible war, if started, he believed, in her hour of need, Britain would be deserted by her allies because they would know what was being done was morally wrong and indefensible, that Britain was being used as a Trojan horse by the federal government to cripple Europe, or what really threatened the US dollar, the euro. Why he had to sit and witness the whole thing play out in a few moments at Reading Rock on a blast of nitrous seemed equally insane, and yet he is completely entangled in the vectors of its emotional mass that has his mind, or perhaps his heart, trapped in this obscure web or notion. She didn't want to hear it, whilst he on the other hand couldn't stop thinking about it. They'd run into an invisible wall that was somehow forcing them through a life-changing process. The failure of their relationship could have been so easily rooted back to their individual problems in their individual lives. Neither of them were in denial, and neither was in such a bad way. It wasn't like she was some total lost at Cana. She was just pushing the boundaries, as was Dobbs. She was pushing the boundaries of intoxication a little too hard and too regularly, which in itself was not a problem other than the terrible midweek come-downs. He, on the other hand, was pushing the boundaries of what he was willing to conceive as feasibly possible in terms of what she considered doom and gloom. One minute things were going smoothly, and the next minute they weren't going very well. To her, the notion that the global situation was about to seriously fall to bits was exactly what she didn't want to hear. It was the last thing he wanted to hear too. He had always been the eternal optimist, but now he was plagued with this terrible fear, and she didn't like it one bit. It pushed her away from him and destabilised her, and resulted in him staying up until the early hours, trawling the web each night, trying to get a take on the bigger picture. And whereas once he'd been Mr. Positive about everything, suddenly it seemed to him that the way things were panning out, it was moving inextricably towards a showdown with very little possibility for a positive counter-movement. In Dobbs's head, the whole thing was reaching a tipping point. Dobbs feels he has the mind of an unconventional scientist operating in the little-known laboratory of spiritual experience. It is to this laboratory which he drags back his nuggets of research to brush off, observe and dissect. He believes that he, like many others on this planet right now, is engaged in constructing a new set of psychic instrumentation through which to view the universe, and he considers that spirituality is a science that exists on the edge of our current understanding. A science that has only recently begun to be opened up by the pioneers of the superconscious potential of humanity, such as the Nassim Haramins of the world, that open up a new take on science, thus opening themselves to a far bigger picture. A mindset that opens up the fifth or the quintessential element, the realm of spirit itself, right up to the earth dimension. A mindset directed towards mapping a single unified field, in which consciousness and matter are subject to the same principles through the medium of absolute nothingness that encompasses all the fields. In attempting to understand the atomic science, all that is can take place only within the context of the void. That nothingness of space, which is a far bigger picture and yet remains so poorly understood. At the human level, this quintessential matter, or emotional mass as Dobbs terms it, equates to the really big feeling that fills him whenever he touches the stillness at his centre. A feeling that's filling him now and saturating his being as he sits in the presence of this beautiful woman. As he observes her, he knows he has to honour the principles of this understanding. It is the undercurrent of his intention which has to be clear from the beginning. The resultant direction in the various vectors at play in the dynamic of his own emotional mass. The trouble is that looking into this woman's eyes, he doesn't know his intentions anymore, or at least he's too scared to admit them. And you know, I recite that because that sort of came out in, you know, that was my motivation for really writing Laughing Gas, to take it off to the sort of like, to take the big question of what the fucking hell is going on. And I flashed a little map there, and I'll explain a little bit more about fucking on the map. as it is a place. I believe it's in Austria, and there's something coming up about that. A little tour that's going to go from fucking to silly. It's going to cross 3 countries, including France. A friend of mine's. I'll leave the link so you can like his Facebook page. You know, he's trying to get a tour. You know, just to really highlight what's happening in Europe, because, you know, on the 23rd of June 2016, you know, I left England. You know, you know, it broke my heart to see Britain breaking away from Europe, and I predicted it back then. You know, my whole motivation. Can you imagine what it was like living outside the Guardian, trying to shout this message out in a pink rickshaw, running for mayor of London? Not one newspaper covered what I was doing. Not one newspaper. You know, I tried to do so many stunts to try and bring attention to this, but actually, you know, everything that I've done, you know, there is.
So we've got to basically come together, and we've got to realise that we've got power on a local level. That's where the real power is, on the local level, because that's the real people that are in this country, not the politicians up in their House of Commons, but it's the real people in our community that are directly funding that. And we've got to wake the people up and get them involved, because they've been pacified out of the whole process. They've been bored out of the whole process. Take the last European elections. I bet no one here even remembers when the last European election date was, because the expenses scandal was run through the whole period, from the very beginning to the very end, and all you thought, oh my God, all those politicians, all they want to do is build moats around their castles. They program you so you don't vote at critical points. They bore you out of the equation when you should be getting involved, and you could be getting involved, but you think, I don't want anything to do with them. And that's what they want you to think. They don't want your involvement. They don't want your colour. They don't want to hear what you've got to say. And ladies and gentlemen, if we don't get involved now, this country is going to go into war. It's going to go into a full-scale, proper war. And we've got to take a stand. Because if we don't take a stand, we are the enemy. Bristol is the pearl in the whole war machine. This is a legitimate target in war, because this is the main point of the intellectual property coming in from Britain. So ladies and gentlemen, what we're voting for here is you're voting for someone to take a stand and have a voice in this. And I will, if you vote for me, I promise you, I will shout louder than anyone else, and I will be in their faces, and I'll rub it in their faces, and I'll make sure that nothing goes out of this community and funds war, because we've got to take a stand, because once we give up, then we can just let it all go, because it doesn't mean anything, because we're just going to dump depleted uranium on innocent women and children like it's just some kind of show, like we don't care. Do we care? Do you want to go to war? Is this your war?
No, it fucking isn't.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
You know, I can remember turning up to the Guardian, and the security came out, and they were like, "You can't stay here, mate." And I was like, "Oh, sure, of course." And they said, you know, I had to go, and I was like, "Of course, I've got to go. I'm not allowed to stay out here." You know, I mean, I'm you know, trying to get a bit of media attention and everything else like that, and they said that, you know, that they were gonna call the police, and I said that would be a fantastic idea. I'll get my suit on and get ready for when the police come, so we can actually get some press. And of course, I never saw them again. And really, you know, when you're out there on a sort of like doing this sort of stuff, especially direct action, you kind of very often you're on your own, especially if you're doing missions. And so we come together in protest and that sort of stuff. But when we really should have come together for that is we should have engaged in our rights to vote, and we've let that go now, and we've lost that front, and now that front now is moving into France. And if Marine Le Pen gets in, it's gonna.
Most politicians say they want to unite their countries. You appear to want to divide yours with the language you use, and not just you, but your party. I mean, right now, there are Front National councils who are declaring themselves immigrant-free zones. You, not so long ago, talked about Muslims being seen praying in the streets as equivalent to the feelings French people had during the Nazi occupation. The language you use is the language of division. Is that what France wants?
Mais pas du tout, monsieur. Ce qui divise la France aujourd'hui, c'est l'arrivée massive de migrants. Ce qui divise la France aujourd'hui, ce qui crée un sentiment profond d'injustice, c'est quand nous avons des sans-domicile fixe par milliers dans les rues, à qui on dit on ne peut pas vous loger, alors qu'on trouve, en claquant des doigts, des dizaines de milliers de logements pour les migrants. Moi, ma responsabilité de dirigeante française, c'est de penser d'abord et avant tout au bien-être de mon propre peuple, à sa sécurité, à sa prospérité. Vous voulez me donner des leçons d'humanitaire? Mais allez à Calais.
You know, we've obviously cracked the kind of pain of the European Union here, because we can understand that if we can break up the European Union, we just fall privy to NATO. NATO is the ruling force that takes us. We just, you know where this is going. You know, NATO is the arm of this whole thing, and NATO is the source of this intellectual property which is being traded on the table. And that's what you've really got to question is, where is this intellectual property coming from? You know, what is the drive for this massive aggression? Why do they need to hold Russia in this point where Russia's being kind of held at gunpoint by Europe, by the whole European border, so they can't interact, so we can go into Iran and Syria, and kind of force them into a kind of a business relationship where it becomes just a massive arms sales. And we know that Syria is you know, Jesus' parents were from Syria. You know, they were in Jerusalem paying their taxes, apparently. You know, is this whole thing it can't be this? Surely this whole thing can't be a Christian agenda against Syria, because I can't see the objective of it, because this is literally the bloodline of Christ, surely. So I don't know who or where this is truly coming from, but this is going to be spilling the blood, and this is spilling the bloodline of Christ's bloodline here. And you know, this whole agenda of pushing this, I have to question where this is really coming from, why this is so necessary, why it's so necessary to hate the Syrians now, and you know, and we can say, well, you know, who's funding this? You know, we see this thing here, this you know, Obama stating this thing here.
Was moving too slowly, but the fall of Ramadi has galvanized the Iraqi government. So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province. Last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province. Last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces. Last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces.
You know, why did he need to tell us that? You know, we are kind of, we're in a position now where, you know, if you didn't vote in that European election, I'm sorry, but you created a situation, and if you voted against Europe, and how did you feel at Glastonbury? I couldn't even be at Glastonbury on the day of that. I felt as if I'd lost the heart of my country on that day. I don't know how you felt on that day. You know, I was in tears. You know, I was driving down. I could have been at Glastonbury, and I was offered a ticket. I just couldn't be there. I just knew that me shouting out everything I was shouting out, especially Nibiru, I just felt like a crazy man in my country, you know, and I just felt I'd been on this frontier the whole time, and I couldn't get any coverage, really, in terms of any of that. I felt like a dagger had gone into my heart on that day. That's the honest truth of that. And now this front moves into France, and I'm telling you, you need to demonstrate to your God which side of the fence you're really on now. You need to do a pilgrimage, because it's unclear to me, and I think it's unclear to most of Europe, because we're all looking like idiots now, aren't we, really? You know, all those who voted for Brexit, you know, many of you who voted for Trump, saying he's completely anti-NATO.
United in our recognition of NATO as the bulwark of our collective defence, and today we've reaffirmed our unshakable commitment to this alliance. Mr. President, I think you confirmed that you're 100% behind NATO.
I mean, he didn't say yes there. maybe he is going to maybe he's going to double cross Theresa May there. Maybe he's not going to give her the support at the last moment. Maybe that's the whole game here. Maybe Britain will be isolated and we will be left to deal with the mess that we're making here. Not that we're making this mess, but I position myself politically because of Nibiru by saying the things that I say. I'm not with this agenda. You know, Assad opened his country up to all the Christians fleeing Iraq. You know, he offered his country as a sanctuary country for Christians. You know, this eye surgeon that we demonize, who's married to an English woman, you know, we need a pilgrimage. You know, we all need to demonstrate all the time which side of the fence we're on. Don't just sit on the fence here. Don't just do nothing. And so lastly, you know, because I came from Glastonbury, and I want to read you another bit of text now, from the Cobham Bible, which all surfaced right about the time of the, you know, when Henry VIII came and he basically hung, draw, and quartered the Glastonbury bishop, the Catholic bishop, and there was massive suppression in Britain then, massive suppression, and by the Catholics, and quite why maybe he was the one who released the books into if you like the public domain, that they should go off into hiding in sort of like and be folk tales and that sort of stuff. But I just want to read you this excerpt. It's not long, but it's quite amazing. You know, this is part of our ancient history, and I'll read you this excerpt. It's amazing. It's all about Nibiru and Nemesis. Okay, so this is from the Cobham Bible. It's chapter 3, the destruction and recreation. It is known, and the story comes down from ancient times, that there was not one creation, but two, a creation and a recreation. It is a fact known to the wise that the earth was utterly destroyed once, and then reborn on a second wheel of creation. At the time of the great destruction of earth, God caused a dragon from out of the heaven to come and encompass her about. The dragon was frightful to behold. It lashed its tail, it breathed out fire and hot coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold bright light, and beneath, on the belly, was a ruddy-hued glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke. It spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stenchful, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passage caused great thunderings and lightnings to rend the thick darkened sky, and all heaven and earth being made hot. The seas were loosened from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. There was an awful shrilling trumpeting, which outpowered even the howling of the unleashed winds. Men were stricken with terror, and went mad at the awful sight of the heavens. They were loosened from their senses, and dashed about, crazed, not knowing what they did. The breath was sucked from their bodies, and they were burnt with a strange ash. And then it passed, leaving earth unwrapped with a dark, glowing mantle which was rudely lit up inside. The bowels of the earth were torn open in great writhing upheavals, and a howling whirlwind rent the mountains apart. The wrath of the sky monster was loosened in the heaven. It lashed about in flaming fury, roaring like 1,000 thunders. It poured down fiery destruction amid a welter of thick black blood. So awesome was the fearfully aspected thing that the memory mercifully departed from man. His thoughts were smothered under a cloud of forgetfulness. The earth vomited forth great gusts of foul breath from awful mouths opening up in the midst of the land. The evil breath bit at the throat before it drove men mad and killed them. Those who did not die in this manner were smothered under a cloud of red dust and ashes, and were swallowed by the yawning mouths of earth, or crushed beneath crashing rocks. The first sky monster was joined by another, which swallowed the tail of the one going before, but the two could not be seen at once. The sky monster reigned and raged above the earth, doing battle to possess it, but the many-bladed sword cut them in pieces, and their falling bodies enlarged the land and sea. In this manner the earth was destroyed by calamity descending from out of the skies. The vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth monsters more fearsome than any that had ever haunted the uneasy dreams of men. Men and their dwelling places were gone, only sky boulders and red earth remained where once they were. But amidst all the desolation a few survived, for man is not so easily destroyed. They crept out from the caves and came down from the mountainsides, their eyes wild and their limbs trembled, their bodies shook and their tongues lacked control. Their faces were twisted and their skin hung loose on their bones. They were as maddened wild beasts, driven into an enclosure before flames. They knew no law, being deprived of all the wisdom they once were and they once had, and those who had guided them were gone. The earth, only true altar of God, had offered up a sacrifice of life and sorrow to atone for the sins of mankind. Man had not sinned indeed, but in the things he had failed to do. Man suffers not only for what he does, but for what he fails to do. He is not chastised for making mistakes, but for failing to recognize and rectify them. You know, the truth is I don't know what to do anymore. I haven't got any clues, you know. Like I say, my friend's doing this. We were taking it a little bit further with the idea of a pilgrimage out here, because I just want to offer and facilitate anything I can for you at this time to demonstrate whether this is your war, whether you're going to sort of like it, because that's what Laughing Gas was all about. You know, the message I was given when I presented this to my God, the answer I got was, don't worry about your earth, I've already deployed my best. Unprecedented peace will now be waged upon your earth. And I don't know who's going to wage that peace. Maybe it's the Syrians, maybe it's you. I'm of a mind it's you, that's my prediction. But some would argue that I'm wrong with all my predictions. And they'd probably argue that I'm wrong with this one. Maybe it's the Syrians that are going to do it. I mean, you know, you look at someone like Iran, they haven't invaded another nation in nearly 300 years. You know, you think about all the depleted uranium we dumped in Iraq in the form of depleted uranium bombshells. You know, and then we say they'd be irresponsible with nuclear technology. We could see what we could do with Fukushima now. We could sort this out if we came together. But you know, the media is kind of holding us in place in this other story, and the story is World War III, isn't it? It's this slow, long-moving process to giving over all power to NATO and leading us into a state of all-out World War III. And it's all been done for technology. Because we want the technology, and if we don't get the technology, someone else might get the technology and use it against us, because that's the deal on the table. They only deal with the most aggressive forces. And so it's a choice of really war or peace, and you can sit on the fence. You know, like it says in the beginning of my book, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. This is a wall. This is a massive wall, and it's a wall to war. And you've been down this road before, believe it or not, and you've been here right at this point before, and you made choices. And now you're going to see whether you want to remake those same choices. And you know, it doesn't look like I'm going to be at Glastonbury this year. You know, to me, the battlegrounds move over to here. Like I say, we've got Tony Blair, not Tony Blair. We've got Tony Blair, running around sort of like France, telling the French it's not too late that Britain could reverse Brexit.
I want to be explicit. Yes, the British people voted to leave Europe, and I agree the will of the people should prevail. I accept right now there is no widespread appetite to rethink. But the people voted without knowledge of the terms of Brexit. As these terms become clear, it is their right to change their mind. Our mission is to persuade them to do so.
Now, can you imagine that coming from Tony Blair in France? It was the same for us, you know. And Tony Blair tried to get France to join the Iraq War in 2003, and they wouldn't join, and ended up with McDonald's taking the name French fries out of their product name and calling them Freedom Fries, which I don't think was a massive loss for France. But you can imagine that Tony Blair representing the sort of like the European Union sort of like campaign is not really a strong point for the French, while Marine Le Pen comes in and sort of like and talks Frexit. And so the battlegrounds kind of for me has moved over here, because this is, you can see where this is going, and you really need to demonstrate right now which side of the fence you're on. You really need to, because maybe the whole political system is absolutely finished, and maybe that's why you didn't engage. But then you either just give up and let the whole thing just go off the edge and into war, and you do nothing, or you may have had a plan before, a better plan, where real people come together. I mean, that's why, you know, I used to do my political party stuff, was to try and demonstrate that, you know, when we have party, we think of something like a real old-fashioned party where you're all standing around a big sound system. But that, to me, is people coming together. That's a democracy. That's what democracy means. Demo, people, crassy, combining form, coming together, not this fake stuff. And we can't say that it becomes democracy if we involve ourselves in it, but we didn't. We kind of all had our opinions about it and everything else like that, but we don't engage. And that was my whole purpose with everything I did, especially the last stunt I did in Glastonbury the year before was the House of Commons, which was a whole kind of piss take out of the whole thing, and just trying to, you know, with my birthday party, where I actually run in that election at the time of that Glastonbury in 2015, I think. I actually run with my manifesto, which was a miracle, and that was quite hilarious to do, against James Heapy, the Tory character, who I said is it never trust a hippie or never trust a heapy. So here we are. You know, it's I don't know what to do anymore, really, other than just put the information out there and just try and get you realise that real sovereignty is in here. And that's where you're making this choice. They're going to ask you to come into a lot of hate of refugees now. And you've got to think, these people are fleeing bombs that have come from Britain, bombs that have come from France, bombs that have come from America. They're fleeing funding by, well...
So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
You can see it all. It's all pretty laid bare. You've just got a choice in this. And it's just a story. They just offer you a story that enables you and gives you the consent to go into a lot of hatred. And so a pilgrimage up here in the to the Pyrenees, where so many people come, that's going to be still my focus. And I'm still, like I say, keeping the videos about where that's going to. And like I say, my friend Ben is organising a wobble bike ride. It's 1,000 kilometres. He wants to do it on a wobble bike, and he's inviting people to get involved. And it's from fucking to Silly, to really try and capture, you know, Silly's in, I think it's in France or in Belgium, and fucking's I think it's in Austria. And so he's going to come via France. So he's going to try and link this whole thing up. And it just needs some support, you know. It just needs support, even if you don't come along, even if you just want to. It's just, you know, I don't know, any and every effort that people are making right now to sort of like to help France, because we don't want France to make the same mistake that we've just made. Unless this really was your plan to sort of like break Europe, if that's your whole plan. I mean, if that's really where you're going with this, and you really want to break the European alliance, you know, it's if that's what this is all about. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, but we've, you know, that if I'm not actually honest, if I'm not smart enough to come up with all the opinions that I have, really, especially, you know, some of the stuff, you know, I get a lot of the stuff through my own messages and through my own process, and then I have to kind of fill in the gaps with my own research and verify the stuff that I get, and maybe I'm completely wrong. you know, you've all got to follow your heart and truth right now. And I would say just come out of who is right and who is wrong, and just be the best possible you right now, and speak the best possible, your honest heart truth. Remember Jesus, if he did exist, you know, in the Bible it says, to your own heart be true. You know, is this your story of hate for all these refugees? Is that the story that's in your heart right now? Do you want to go down this corridor? Wasn't it UK independence that you really thought you could have? Was it really this kind of new kind of partnership that all sits around NATO and war? Didn't you really think that Trump was anti-NATO? You know, Alex Jones had me utterly convinced. I really, I got to say, we didn't have me utterly convinced at all, actually. I mean, but I was starting to really starting to think, and maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. I don't know. I think things are turning around. I know. I see Trump nodding.
You're 100% behind
when
NATO.
Theresa May says that. He doesn't actually say yes. There is an argument that that he might back out, that he is the sort of like he is the one who's going to pull out at the last minute. Maybe that's what I saw. We don't know. Dreams. I don't see my visions as true or false. I just see them as possible outcomes. They're kind of like these steering marks. And when you see these certain things, they're like warning signs that you need to bring it a little bit more this direction if you don't want that outcome, and you need to bring it a little bit more. So I don't see visions as something that are absolute in any way. I don't believe the Akashic record can be written as such in the future of our actions. I think they're always open to change, and you might get a prediction of the future, but no one absolutely knows the outcome. And I can only predict. All my Nibiru flybys, actually, okay, I saw Nibiru in a vision, but all my Nibiru flybys, they were by calculations of seeing all the dates that I've showed, and showing this obvious 200-day mark. It's, this message that you're going to wage peace, that comes from my God, and you're not choosing you're not actually choosing a side here. You're actually choosing a God. Which means that actually, in fundamental, you're actually choosing a soul. All this happening really here is Earth is ending its duality. And you're either becoming your higher self, the true essence of who you are, or you're becoming your ego consciousness. Neither is bad. They're both souls at different stages in their kind of soul evolution. But it's time for, this is going to be the time when ego has a life of its own, a big part. It's going to come in here, and so we know that there's going to be a big transition, because this has always been on the cards, that what Buddha would call the hungry ghosts are going to come out from that place and come back into, have the opportunity to incarnate again. And I see this as a big part of this. It's a natural karmic Passover. And I see that happening, but we choose that. If we wish to choose that, if we wish to go into this hate now, that's a choice. It's just hate. If that's what's going to serve you, if you're going to hate these refugees for fleeing the mayhem that's been bestowed upon them, and you know what Syria is, you know who came from Syria, you know whose bloodline the Syrian people's, whose bloodline it is, of the Syrian people.
There are two more things that's about to happen. See,
I'll take you back where he said on one of those days, on his third day, he said he heard the voices of the children cry. See? So today we look around, you are the children. And the children's. And see what's happening. See? You are. You are search for the spirituality, and you are hunger for spirituality, and you are thirst for the spirituality. And many things has gone wrong today. We start from the child abuse to child neglect, spouse abuse, elderly abuse, and abuse of one another and abusing yourself. And that is the sign, or it says, you heard the voices of the children cry. See? So we are in that era right now. You know, I think we're at the end of it. And the next thing he saw, he said, he's seen a huge light, a flash in the sky. And day become brighter than day, he said. And charcoal and ashes fall from sky and cover the earth, he said. And the next day, there was a new beginning because he's seen new grass grow and the water is clear, he said. And this time he only see God's children playing down there, he said. Okay, these are some of the prophecies that Crazy Horse seen. And we have compared many of these to other tribes, and they're similar. And it is coming. And it's going to be here soon. Hello.
More about, you know, the flyby that I predicted on the 25th and what I offer as evidence for that flyby a little bit, because, you know, over Mexico, you know, that I said it would fly by on the 25th, didn't I? 25th of January 2017. And we saw what I offer as a flyby on that came by on the 21st of January 2017. And of course that was a day after Trump's inauguration. When he's seriously threatening Mexico. Now the Mexicans saw that what I call as a Nibiru flyby. They saw that, you know, that big cloud you see round the side of it. They saw that as like as the sleeve, the cuff of a sleeve, and they saw the tail as the arm, and they saw the planet Nibiru in the center. They saw that as the fist. They saw that literally as the fist of God. That's literally how they perceive that. And I'd say they're right. I'd say they're absolutely right. You know, Trump was really quite heavy about the whole thing on his inauguration. He's been totally heavy. To them, that was the fist of God. To me, it was Nibiru, but I see Nibiru kind of as the fist of God. I can see, I can barely see a thing without glasses sometimes, you know. But it's sometimes good to be able to see into the whites of your eyes who you're speaking to, you know. And we can't do that with all these politicians and everything else like that. And we hear all this stuff. You know, the story is that humans can't go near it because they die, and a machine only lasts 6 hours, so they can't use machine because it only lasts 6 hours before it melts at Fukushima. And I do the maths of that, and I think, so we can send armies and armies to sort of like to bomb countries and everything else like that. But Fukushima, it costs, you know, machines only last 6 hours, so you know, it's just like, well, just how many machines do you need? You know, if they only last 6 hours, how many machines do you need? What, can we not come together as a globe to supply the amount of machines? If we all came up with sort of like if every country in the world came up with one of those machines and gave it to Japan, you know, we'd have, I don't know how many six hours worth. You know, we have to remember that lots of little is still lots. You know, and all your efforts out there and all our combined efforts to stop this agenda, we've got to remember that we might only be able to do so little in what we do, but lots of little is still lots. And we've got to remember that, especially in this time, you know, all your efforts, all our combined efforts at the moment to stop this agenda that's going forward. And so I wanted just to talk a little bit. We're getting drastic effects by it, and one of the things that happens is because it's, I said this as if you like a prediction, but it wasn't really my prediction. It was a message that came in via Cody and Kim, who run a channel called the Star Lodge Healing Centre. And they were the ones who I contacted when I first started making videos up here, and I read one of his. I read at that time. I don't think they had a YouTube channel, but I read one of his messages somehow. I can't remember how I started. Maybe it was on YouTube, but I really loved his message. It was a really beautiful message, and he channels like my mum channels, like my dad channeled, and his messages were beautiful, utterly beautiful. And I wrote to him and I said, look, I just want you to know that I know you're not getting a lot of hits on your site, but your message is beautiful, and the right people who need it are getting it, and I really needed it, And one of his messages came through recently was that, I hate to tell you, be the bearer of, it was kind of, I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but it was a message he got through, and it was a bit of a sad message, because it was saying that the radiation levels were going to rise really high, because in an effort to kind of assist this planet, it seemed to be on this sort of message that was coming through, that much of the radiation to stop us killing our oceans, much of this radiation that's pouring out of Fukushima and into the oceans is going to be sucked up by these massive storms that are created as we go over the whole Nemesis system. Because, like I say, it pulls on our whole planet massively, and it stretches us, if you like, from our position of how we're held, and the assistance that we're getting, as I'm understanding as well, which is, this is the whole thing is a very unbelievable thing. That's the problem with Nibiru, really. But everything that's happening at the moment is unbelievable, really. But he gave this message, basically. Kim or Cody gave this message, basically saying that it was going to suck up vast amounts of radiation from these massive cyclones and tornadoes in the ocean. We're going to create these massive water funnels and draw up like sucking out snake venom. This much of this poison, but it was going to be rained down on land, and that we had to prepare on some level, because we would have enormous radiation poisoning. We have enormous radiation poisoning absolutely coming our way, and that's the absolute evidence of it, of this whole system. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? It's utterly heartbreaking. I'll try and do this without glasses, because someone mentioned the other day that you look better without glasses, and maybe So, hi there, Dave Dobbs here. Kind of a bit of an interesting video today, really, because it's I feel a bit low today. I've been feeling very emotional. This news that the radiation levels are rising over Europe, this big spike, and I'm looking just down at some of the sort of like the different news headings and that sort of stuff. And is it because Russia's tested a nuke in the Arctic, or is it because in one of my last videos, when I did an interview with Rex Bear on his channel Leap Project, and in it I said one of the things that's going to happen when Nibiru flies by is you got to understand it's in the southern hemisphere, and Nemesis, the whole system, this system with 7 planets orbiting around it. One obviously a very big one, and then smaller ones thereafter, or quite what order they're in. I understand Nibiru is the most furthest out, but some would call Nemesis itself, this dwarf planet, Nibiru. We have different names for it and that sort of stuff, and I don't think it's worth getting too confused with the different names and everything else like that. We just know we've got a dwarf planet up there, and we